I had this friend way back in college who worked at 7-Eleven. This guy was a real weirdo. This guy said his favorite part was stocking the fridge, that this was a place he could escape from the customers and relax. But then later this guy told me the real reason he liked going into the fridge and how he thought that some people were going to find out what was really going on here. An interesting part of science is the ideal gas law. This is something that people have been interested in for a long time. It's very easy to watch this and understand this from an external point of view. It's based on pressure, volume, and temperature, and some other numbers based on the actual gas inside the chamber. It's the simple idea that drives combustion engines. The volume of the piston cylinder stays the same, but when the spark plug ignites the fuel, the temperature increases. Because the volume is the same and the temperature increases, the pressure also increases. This increase in pressure drives the piston, which turns the crankshaft, which turns the wheels. I have a friend who teaches kindergarten. She says her favorite part is when they go to the park. When the kids are in the classroom, they are very well behaved. When they walk from the school to the park, they are very well behaved. When they get to the park, however, this well-behaved system suddenly explodes into chaos. One of the most brain-bending ideas of science is the second law of thermodynamics, the one that says that entropy will increase in a closed system. One way to describe this is that the disorder will tend to increase disorder over time, but this is really only a metaphor. In reality, the definition of an increase in entropy is an increase in the number of possible states any configuration a system can exist in. For example, if you have 10 coins, all heads, that is very low entropy. There is not very many ways you can have a system of 10 coins can be all heads. On the other hand, if you have half heads and half tails, that has a lot more entropy, because there are many variations of the 10 coin system that can have half heads and half tails. Some say that the flow of entropy is related to the flow of time. Some say the flow of entropy is the flow of time. After all, what is time but a way to measure how a system evolves? Some say that entropy can be used to describe why we can remember the past, but we can't remember the future. The future represents a state that our current brain hasn't been encoded with yet. Events that have yet to come in through our senses and reconfigure our neural network with those events. Information and entropy are highly related, but information doesn't necessarily require people. Information can exist on its own. Entropy can be used to describe theoretically why the ideal gas law does what it does. Thinking in terms of macro physics, this makes perfect sense. But that's only because our brains have evolved to see the relationship between pressure, volume, and temperature as naturally doing what it is they do. But when you want to derive the ideal gas law, you must use statistics that assume each particle in the system doesn't know there are any other particles in that same system. So when you open a can of whipped cream, for example, all the gas rushes out, not because the individual gas particles want to get away from each other. It's just that the probability of each gas particle being in that small confined space is very, very low. The probability of each particle being more or less evenly spread out in a much larger space is much greater. So essentially, nature will always revert to a state that has more entropy, or a collection of particles will naturally spread out, increasing the entropy whenever any artificial restraints are removed. When they go through the opening, one by one, they all go to different areas. Some go that way, others go that way. When they are constrained, they behave a certain way. When they are unconstrained, they behave a different way. That's why she loves taking them to the park, because once they go through the gate, they suddenly smile and start running, because they all want to go to a different part of the park. After all, nobody likes standing in line. Finally, he told me why he likes going into the cooler. Not only can he take his time restocking the shelves, but he also likes to take hits off the whipped cream bottle. They use nitrous oxide, which is also known as laughing gas. And when this gets into his brain, he suddenly fades. He suddenly and momentarily decides to forget everything. This is like taking a mental break when, for a brief moment, nothing makes any sense. It's like this is a temporary detachment from reality. But then people would come in and complain that the whipped cream they bought doesn't come out when you push the button. I mean, what's the point of having a can of whipped cream if the whipped cream only wants to stay in the can?